Welcome back. Now, the Gauteng Portfolio Committee on Community Safety has expressed outrage. This is after the Independent Police Investigative Directorate, that's IPID, their annual report revealed that 97 officers are being investigated for sexual misconduct or rape. The committee is calling for swift action against those found guilty. Committee Chair Dr Bandile Masuku joins us now in studio for more on this conversation. Dr. Masuku, appreciate the time. Thank you so much for it. Who do these people answer to? Because surely accountability now is going to be the next big question.
It is a big question. And besides accountability, there should be a lot of transparency because we need to bring a bit of trust on the police service itself. And as part of the work of the committee, we have been doing a lot of oversight visits to police stations in terms of looking at the compliance to the Domestic Violence Act. But one of the reports that came very sharply, which we are talking about today, is that some of the victims that come to the police station are actually victimized by the police. You know, and Gauteng in the 97 is the one that has got the majority of the officials who have done this heinous deed.
Are we able to confirm whether these SAPS officials have been suspended, prosecuted, dismissed, or are they still serving in uniform while under investigation?
It's part of the process. You know, they need to be, it was under suspension, and where there is prima facie evidence, I think they've always been a process where cases have been of discipline and even criminal charges have been laid.
Would you say that there's a little bit of a persistent culture of small but still significant of some sort of sexual violence within the SAPS, or is that perhaps leading in too much? Because it might be small, but any kind of disruption to the SAPS removes the kind of trust that you were speaking about.
It is, and I think it's an issue of the societal mentality and what the contextual situation that we find ourselves in, because this type of officials also live in communities, and they also get influenced by some of the stereotypes that they get in the communities, and I think the stresses that they found, and now they take it out on some of these actually victims that come through the police station.
So what do we do? How do we change the culture? Because yes, this prosecution must happen first and foremost. If they are indeed found to be, because they're under investigation, none of them have actually been found guilty of it yet, correct?
Yeah, correct. None of them have been found guilty. This is the report from 24-25 annual report. Yeah. And we're hoping that those cases should have been concluded. And we know that IPID has got a long list of backlog cases. And I think it's one of their issues that they need to actually sort out. And the SAPS, as part of building trust, they need to help IPID to fast-track some of these cases.
So what happens now with this entire scenario? Because you can have these officers, for example, suspended. There might still be a culture within, and I'm not saying there is, but there might just necessarily actually be a culture within the SAPS which continues to have this sort of thing happening all the time. How do we stop that from continuing? Because surely it can't even happen even just once.
Yeah, I think part of it is the retraining. We have conducted this focused intervention study on domestic violence compliance, and one of the recommendations that we are actually making is the issue of training and retraining, and also helping the police to be able to deal with victims that come or survivors of domestic violence, so that we're able to help, our most vulnerable in society.
Is it really a training issue? And I say, is it really? Because surely, as you said earlier, that it might just be a psychological thing, that we need to start looking at it from a socio and psychological factor, and maybe the training isn't the problem, but how we speak to them, the culture we instill in them, in the police, etc., so that they change that mindset.
It should start there. I think periodically we need to be able to explain to police, particularly on how to handle some of these cases, and then it will be able to then, in terms of advocacy, in terms of work that is done in the police force itself and the community, is the work that we need to continue doing. Because it's not only the police, we need to deal with healthcare workers, we need to deal with everybody on how, to treat and protect the most vulnerable in society.
Speaking of the most vulnerable, how do we ensure that those survivors then of police sexual violence especially are actually receive justice, one, rather than being silenced, intimidated, which is ultimately possible, especially from people in those types of positions, and to ensure that they're protected?
Yeah, it is a pattern, most of the crimes that I actually reported, are reported over weekends and on Mondays or Tuesdays, and then you find that the case gets actually withdrawn. And it's also a matter of intimidation, coercion, and people and the survivors are forced to withdraw the cases. And these are the issues that we need to deal with. So in general, we are saying to IPID, it's one of the work that they need to do, but the SAPS must strengthen its actually police officers. But the other important aspect is to have dedicated officers, who will be able to deal with survivors almost all the time. And I've seen and I've met a whole lot of them who do their work under difficult situations, and they are very much, actually productive, and they get good results.
Should we be calling for more stringent or strict terms when it comes to how long they spend in jail if they are indeed found guilty? Because one might say that even if we apprehend them, even if we convict them, for example, it just happens to be not enough time perhaps that they spend in jail, etc. And those perpetrators come out and seek retaliation too.
Yeah, I think the issue should be about how hard we are able to punish them, because the act itself, destroys the authority of the state. It actually takes away the trust of the people on the state, and it should be something that we severely punish. But also that punishment, even if it's that severe, we need to correct, have a corrective way of how these people can be rehabilitated.
Yeah, because I think the key worry here is that if we're going to have the SAPS try to take in gender-based violence cases from other people, and yet there are some happening within its own ranks and aren't treated, shall we say, with conviction, then it beggars all this confidence that, again, we speak about. How do we rebuild public confidence then off the back of something like this? I would imagine it would take years.
No, it will take years, but I think it's something that needs to be undertaken. I think what we see with the Madlanga Commission, it's one part of, citizens losing trust on the police, and we need to find a way as a country, to make sure that we rebuild that trust on the police force. But the majority of the officials and officers in the force, they are pretty much hardworking, they're dedicated, and we do have, those few that spoil, the whole good work of the police force.
Yeah, dealing with this systemically is going to be a key part of the work you then do from here. Alongside the SAPS, alongside the police minister, for example, as well, is there going to be a dedicated team now focused specifically just on this, or is this going to just have to be part and parcel of things? Because, again, like we said, the seriousness of this can't be understated.
No, it should be something that have got a dedicated team. And IPID in Gauteng, they're going to come before the committee in the week's time, I think on the 5th of March. Sure. And one of the reports that we want is to see the progress on the cases that Gauteng has. And you see there are two types of these cases according to the Section 28 of the IPID Act. There are those that it's sexual assault by police officers and sexual assault on police duty, on police custody, which makes it, actually quite different, because it means there are a number of people who, when they are in custody as women, and then they found themselves to be abused, and that there are those that is actually a direct act of officials. And we want the IPID, I think one of the calls that we're making is that IPID must be strengthened, must be capacitated, because the way the cases are so much, the capacity of IPID is also one of the things that needs to be improved.
Have the families come back to seek some sort of retribution, maybe not retribution perhaps as a word, but really just to kind of get that bit of justice, to come and ask what is happening with these cases? Because if this is 24-25, of course they've been dealing with this
for a long time
already, and that's some emotional distress as well that's at play here.
it is a very traumatic experience. I think it's something that, in terms of the report that we want from the IPID on the 5th, it's not only just going to be about the figures and numbers, but sometimes we normally end there, and now we need to find in detail what the process, where the processes are, and how far the cases have been. And then the question that we need to ask the police commissioner will be that what other actions that will help us to prevent these actions happening in future.
So you said on the 5th of March is possibly when this IPID report is coming through. What is that report again that you said exactly? Is it just...
No, usually we have a quarterly engagement with the provincial commissioner in terms of the crime stats, but as a province, we have included quarterly every time that IPID give actually report on the work that they're doing in the province.
Yeah, and I don't think the work is something that you don't know already, or the amount of distress is not something that you don't know perhaps then already. How do we change South Africa's culture, you think, of violence? Is this really just a basis of, and I know, you're mainly Gauteng Community Safety Committee chair, but overall there's still the conversation around ensuring that South Africans understand. Is it just an unemployment issue? Is it just a labor issue? Is it a poverty issue? Because all those things would say are possibly one. Or is there something greater that could be at play here?
It is a combination of factors. The socioeconomic situation itself does play a role, and the trauma and the distress and the depression and the psychological impact of that state, of unemployment, no low economic growth and so on, has got some impact. But also our history, and our history has got patches of actually violence. And I'm certain that maybe we have not really went through a process really of rehabilitating the whole society, and maybe the issue of the national dialogue should be one of the things that the national dialogue looks at on how...
What is the national dialogue doing right now, if I may ask? What is the national dialogue doing?
There are processes that have been put in place, and the issue is the national dialogue has to be taken to the communities to have this conversation. One has went to understand how the process went in Colombia, and I think it was pretty much successful, because Colombia now has become a bit stable, and the community and the whole nation is working towards a common goal. And I think the more we make it a mass-based and it's at a community level, not at our level, we shouldn't be the focal point as provincial leaders or national leaders. The focus must be on the ground, civic leaders, ordinary people on the street, so that we talk around these traumas and issues that needs to be sorted out by the whole country, because it can't be one person. It should be a joint thing. And one thing that I'm happy about in the committee that I'm leading is that we have agreed that issues of crime, we cannot politicize, we cannot do party politicking, because it affects the general population of our province and of our country. We need to work in unison. And I think that's what the national dialogue should be able to do.
It's going to be a tough job for you as you head towards the local government elections, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. People require service delivery, and we need to respond to it. We need to answer if we have not done what is supposed to be done.
Do you expect a backlash because of it? Because of the poor service delivery you've already been seeing?
There is going to be a backlash, but I think with proper engagement with the communities, we need to build trust on the state. One of the important aspects is that the communities and the society and citizens must have confidence on the state. If we fail to do that, then we don't have a country.
And that's the worrying part, is some people might even argue that you have failed. And of course, they'd be across the aisle from you and not necessarily in your party. Dr. Masuku, thank you so much for the time. I appreciate it as well. And I know it was a wide-ranging interview, so I appreciate your candor in all of that. Dr. Bandile Masuku, the Gauteng Community Safety Committee chair, joining us. And the premise of this conversation was really around the 97 members of the South African police force that have been accused of sexual violence or rape nationally, and just what happens to them. That